She caught him in the act. Her heart shattered, her world collapsing in seconds. But when she stormed out, she didn't know she was walking into something far worse. The truth was about to explode in her face, and she'd never see it coming. Who was the real betrayer? It's hard to pinpoint exactly when I began to notice the cracks in my marriage, but I'd say it started when things began to feel off. Not like the usual rough patch every couple goes through, but something deeper, something unspoken. Maybe it was the way Emily would glance at her phone, or how her smile didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. Or maybe it was just me being paranoid. After all, I had nothing to worry about, right? I'm John. I married Emily almost 8 years ago, after meeting in college. It was supposed to be forever. She was beautiful, smart, and always full of life. I was the stable one, the one with a plan. We had it all, a house, a dog, and things were supposed to keep getting better. But then, something changed. At first, I thought it was just the stress of work. Emily had been working late more often, and it was making me feel a distance growing between us. But there were no signs of anything major, right? No evidence. I kept convincing myself that it was just a phase. But then, one night, everything felt different. I had just finished dinner and was on the couch, trying to relax after a long day. Emily walked in, looking exhausted. There was something in her eyes, something that told me she wasn't just tired. "You okay?" I asked, my voice soft, testing the waters. "Yeah, just tired," she replied, avoiding my gaze before walking into the kitchen. Something about the way she avoided me, the way she closed the door behind her, felt wrong. It wasn't just fatigue. I could feel it in my gut, but I brushed it off, convinced it was nothing. Over the next few weeks, the signs became harder to ignore. Her phone was always face down, always locked. She'd make excuses to leave the house at odd hours. I didn't want to believe it. I tried to convince myself it was just work stress or a temporary phase. But then one night, everything changed. I came home to the sound of voices in the house. Not just any voices. My father's voice. And Emily's. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. Something was wrong, but I didn't know what yet. I stood there, paralyzed, unsure of what to do. But I didn't know the worst part of the story, not yet. I stood there in the hallway, heart racing, trying to process what was happening. My father was in my house, but it wasn't just a casual visit. The laughter, the casual conversation, something about it felt wrong. Why was he here? And why was he alone with Emily, behind closed doors? I could hear their voices getting louder as they talked. It wasn't like my father to just pop over unannounced, especially not at this hour. I felt a wave of nausea hit me, and I knew I had to act. But I wasn't sure how. I needed to understand what was going on without making my presence known, without giving anything away. I crept closer to the door of the living room, the place where they were. I pressed my ear against the wood. I couldn't make out their exact words, but I could hear the comfort in their voices, the ease between them. I don't know why, but I was desperate to figure out what had happened, so I quietly walked to the kitchen, where I could see through a small crack in the doorway. And that's when I saw it. Emily was sitting on the couch, her body slightly turned toward my father. She was laughing. Laughing. My father, the man I trusted most in this world, was looking at her in a way I had never seen before. It wasn't the look of a father-in-law. It was something much more intimate. I backed away slowly, almost in a daze. My mind was spinning, trying to piece together what I had just seen. My father had always been a pillar of respectability, someone I looked up to, and now, I didn't know who he was. The questions raced through my mind. Was I being paranoid? Was I reading too much into a simple conversation? No. I knew deep down that something was wrong. But what exactly? The fear of what I might discover began to settle deep within me. The knot in my stomach was impossible to ignore. I spent the next few hours pacing. The hours turned into days. I needed to confront her, needed answers, but I couldn't bring myself to ask. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear what the truth was. The following day, I acted as normal. We shared breakfast, small talk, but all I could think about was the conversation I had overheard. And I realized, I didn't know who Emily was anymore. But that wasn't the worst part. Not by a long shot. I spent the next few days pretending everything was normal. The tension was unbearable, though. I couldn't look at Emily without feeling the weight of the silence between us. The laughter I had overheard haunted me. My mind wouldn't stop spinning, questioning every little detail of our lives, every conversation we'd ever had. But nothing felt right. I could feel her pulling away, even more than she already had. That's when I decided I couldn't keep avoiding the inevitable. I had to confront her, get the answers I was too afraid to ask before. But how? What if I was wrong? What if I misunderstood everything? I knew I had to do it carefully. I had to be calm. I couldn't let her see how much I was breaking inside. One evening, after dinner, I took a deep breath and asked, "Emily, can we talk?" She looked at me, her expression unreadable, and nodded. Sure. I led her to the living room, away from the kitchen where I could feel the walls closing in around me. It was time. My heart was racing, my palms sweaty, but I knew I had to ask her. Why was my dad here the other night? I tried to keep my voice steady, but I could feel the tremble behind the words. Just talking with you. So late. Emily stiffened, her gaze quickly dropping to her lap. For a moment, she didn't say anything. The silence felt suffocating. I pressed on. I heard you two talking, Emily. And, I don't know how to say this, but it didn't sound like a regular conversation. You two were too comfortable, too close. What's going on? Her face paled. The mask of calm she wore for so long was slipping. She looked up at me, and for a split second, I saw guilt in her eyes. I waited. My chest tightened, but she didn't answer immediately. Finally, she sighed. John, there's something I need to tell you. I braced myself. I didn't know what was coming, but deep down, I already feared the worst. I've been having an affair, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The words hit me like a freight train. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. I didn't know what to say. I just stared at her, the woman I'd spent my entire adult life with, who had just shattered everything we'd built. And, your dad. I managed to croak out. Was he involved too? She looked away, avoiding my gaze, and I saw the shame wash over her face. I didn't mean for it to happen, John. But yes, he was. Her words hung in the air, thick with a mixture of disbelief and anger. I couldn't process them at first. Yes, he was. The phrase replayed in my head like an echo, each repetition cutting deeper than the last. I felt the ground beneath me tremble as if my entire world was shifting, and I had no control over it. For what felt like an eternity, neither of us spoke. Emily's eyes darted away from mine, avoiding my gaze as if it was too painful to meet. I, on the other hand, couldn't look away. My mind was racing, but I couldn't piece together anything logical. My father. My own father. I finally found my voice, though it came out ragged. How long? I asked, the words choking me. Emily's lips trembled. She swallowed hard before answering. About 6 months. I never planned for it to happen. It just did. It was a mistake. I couldn't help but laugh, though it wasn't out of humor. It was more of a bitter, guttural laugh. A laugh born from the raw disbelief I felt. A mistake. I repeated, my voice rising. You're telling me that sleeping with my father for 6 months was a mistake? She nodded, her tears welling up, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. My entire life was unraveling before me, and all she could offer was tears and excuses. I'm sorry, John, she whispered, but the apology felt hollow. Empty. The weight of the situation started to settle on me like a suffocating blanket. I could barely breathe. My hands shook as I tried to process the reality of it. I had trusted her. I had loved her. And now, I was looking at a woman who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And my father? I asked, my voice barely audible, as if saying the words aloud would make them too real to bear. What the hell was he thinking? How could he do this to me? Emily took a deep breath, as if preparing herself for the words she had to say. I tried to stop it, John. I did. But, your dad, She paused, her eyes darting around the room, as if looking for something to hold on to. He told me he was lonely, that he was always there for you, but you never needed him. And I don't know, I was just so vulnerable. The words hit me like a slap to the face. My father, had used that excuse? He'd taken advantage of Emily's vulnerability? The man who had raised me, who I had looked up to, had used his position in my life to destroy everything I had worked for. My heart felt like it was breaking in slow motion. You both destroyed me, I said, my voice cracking. Do you have any idea what you've done? Not just to me, but to this family? I couldn't look at her anymore. I couldn't even breathe the same air. My mind was a storm, each thought more chaotic than the last. I stood up abruptly and began pacing the room, trying to steady myself. But nothing made sense anymore. How could everything I thought I knew, everything I'd built with Emily, with my family, just crumble in a matter of moments? I couldn't look at Emily. The weight of her betrayal was suffocating, and I could feel it in every inch of my body. I needed space, air, anything that wasn't her. I stepped into the kitchen, gripping the counter, trying to steady my racing thoughts. The reality of what she had done still hadn't fully hit me. 6 months. For the past 6 months, she had been involved with someone close to me. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. Her sobs echoed through the house, but I couldn't bring myself to console her. She had shattered everything we had built. It felt like my world was falling apart, and I was powerless to stop it. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me from my spiraling thoughts. I looked down and saw it was a message from my father. My chest tightened. "I know this is hard, John. I'm sorry. We both made mistakes. Can we talk?" I stared at the words for what felt like an eternity. The nerve of him. After everything, he was asking to talk? I felt anger surge through me like a firestorm. He didn't deserve to talk. He didn't deserve anything. I didn't respond. Instead, I tossed my phone onto the counter. That was it. I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I had to make a decision. I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't going to just move on. I had lost everything. My trust, my marriage, my father. There was no going back. But maybe there was a way forward. Maybe there was a way to take control of the mess they had made. I walked back into the living room, where Emily was still sitting, tear-streaked and desperate. She looked up at me, hope in her eyes, but I couldn't offer her anything anymore. "You're leaving," I said, my voice steady but cold. Emily stared at me, wide-eyed. "What?" "I can't be with you anymore. You've destroyed everything," I said, my voice sharp with finality. "John, please, I'm sorry. I love you," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "You had a choice, Emily. And you chose him. You chose to ruin everything we had," I said, the words spilling out bitterly. "You're leaving." I grabbed my phone, quickly searching for a nearby hotel. She couldn't stay here, not after everything. I had to move on, even if the thought of it twisted something inside me. I had to start over. The next few days felt like a blur. Emily had left. I couldn't bring myself to feel the relief I thought would come. The house was quieter now, but the silence felt suffocating, heavy with the ghosts of everything that had been shattered. I kept thinking about my father. He hadn't reached out again, but I knew it was only a matter of time before he tried to make amends, or at least explain himself. I wasn't ready to hear his side, not yet. I wasn't sure if I ever would be. But one morning, a week later, I heard a knock on the door. I opened it, half expecting Emily to stand there, looking for a way back into my life. But it wasn't her. It was my father. He stood there, looking older than I remembered, his eyes avoiding mine. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I didn't invite him in. I just stood there, blocking the doorway. "I don't know what there is to talk about," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "You've already done enough." "I know," he said, nodding slowly. "I can't change what happened, John. I can't take back the pain I caused you. But I am sorry. I really am." I wanted to yell at him, to demand why. Why would he do this to me? To us? But the anger was more than I could handle. I clenched my fists at my sides and took a deep breath. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Dad," I said, finally meeting his gaze. "You betrayed me, not just as a father, but as a man I looked up to. How do I live with that?" He stepped back, his expression pained. "I never wanted to hurt you, but I was lonely. Your mother and we've been distant for a while. I didn't know how to fix it. And then I made a terrible decision." "Yeah, you did," I said, my voice cracking. "You destroyed everything." I stood there, staring at him, trying to decide if I wanted to hear any more of his excuses. But I knew one thing for sure. Nothing he said could undo what had happened. I took a step back and sighed. "I need time, Dad. I need space to think. You need to leave." For a moment, he didn't move. Then, with a final, heavy sigh, he turned and walked away. As the door closed behind him, I realized that my entire world had been changed, and there was no going back. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I had to keep moving forward, without them. The days that followed felt endless. I stayed in the house, the one Emily and I had built together, but it no longer felt like home. The silence echoed through every room. No more late-night conversations, no more laughter over dinner, just the hollow hum of my thoughts. My world had been shattered, and I didn't know how to pick up the pieces. I thought about reaching out to friends, but I didn't know what to say. How do you tell someone your entire life has been a lie? That your wife, your father's betrayal, has ripped apart everything you thought you knew? I didn't have the words, and frankly, I didn't have the energy to explain it. I spent most of my time at work, keeping busy, hiding in the routine of the job. But even there, I felt like an imposter. Every smile, every casual conversation felt like a performance. I was waiting for the mask to crack, for the real pain to surface, and it did, slowly. At night, when I was alone, the loneliness was unbearable. I kept thinking about Emily, wondering if she was okay, if she regretted what she'd done. But the truth was, I couldn't care anymore. She had made her choices. She had destroyed us. And it wasn't just her. It was my father, too. The man who had always been my rock had turned out to be the one who had pulled the rug from under me. And that betrayal? That was the hardest to accept. I remember one afternoon, 2 weeks after Emily left, sitting on the couch and staring at the phone. It buzzed with a message. I opened it, half expecting it to be another apology from her or a pathetic attempt at reconciliation. But it wasn't. It was from my father. I've been thinking a lot about everything, John. I know you're hurt. And I understand if you never want to speak to me again, but I'm your father. I'll always be here when you're ready. I stared at the screen, feeling a surge of anger rise in my chest. He had the audacity to send me a message like that? Like we could just pretend this didn't happen? That I could just move on from what he had done? The anger I felt was consuming. I wanted to throw my phone against the wall, but I didn't. I didn't want him to have that kind of control over me anymore. Instead, I deleted the message and turned off my phone. That night, I sat in the darkness of my living room, thinking about what came next. The path ahead was unclear, but I knew one thing. I couldn't let them define me. Emily and my father had both betrayed me in ways I never imagined, but I wasn't going to let their mistakes ruin me. It was time to start rebuilding. The first step was accepting that I had to let go of everything. Them, the life we had, all the dreams that had seemed so real at one point. It was time to move on. For once, it had to be about me. The weeks after my father's message passed in a blur. I kept my distance from everything. I didn't answer calls. I avoided texts. It was easier to stay in my own little world than face the reality of what had happened. The house was still too quiet. The emptiness felt like a constant companion, but it was the price I had to pay for the truth. But then, one day, I walked into work and felt something shift. Maybe it was the sheer exhaustion from avoiding the pain or the weight of living in that same dark space. Whatever it was, I found myself looking at the other people in my life, colleagues, friends, and realizing something. I wasn't alone. I'd always kept to myself, built walls around my emotions, but I couldn't keep hiding. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. I needed something to change. I needed to rebuild, not just my life, but myself. That afternoon, I took a break, walking down the street aimlessly. I hadn't allowed myself to feel anything for a while, but in that moment, everything hit me like a wave. The anger, the sadness, the pain, but also a glimmer of something else, hope. I realized I hadn't let go of everything. I had been holding on to the past, to who I thought I was, who I thought I had been with Emily. But who was I, really? I needed to find out. The next day, I did something I never thought I would. I contacted a therapist. I'd always thought therapy was for other people, people who couldn't handle their problems on their own. But I wasn't handling mine. I was crumbling. I was angry, lost, and in a deep pit I couldn't climb out of alone. So, I made the call. It was hard at first. The first few sessions were filled with awkward silences, me trying to figure out what to say, but slowly, it became clear. I was allowed to feel hurt. I was allowed to be angry. And, most importantly, I was allowed to move on. With time, I realized the anger I had for Emily and my father, while justified, was only holding me back. I couldn't keep carrying the weight of their mistakes. It wasn't easy to forgive, but the more I worked through it, the more I realized I had to let go. For myself, it wasn't an instant transformation. The pain didn't magically disappear after a few therapy sessions. But slowly, piece by piece, I began to rebuild. The first step was learning how to live with myself again. I couldn't rely on the past to define who I was anymore, and I certainly couldn't let the betrayal of Emily and my father control my future. I started with the small things. I changed the layout of the house, moving furniture around, clearing out things that reminded me of her, of them. It wasn't a complete overhaul, but it was a start. For the first time in months, I felt a small sense of control. I was taking my life back, even if it was just one room at a time. I also found myself reconnecting with old friends. People I hadn't seen in years because I had become so consumed by my relationship with Emily. I started reaching out, scheduling drinks, dinners, even simple coffee dates. And each time I did, I felt a little less alone. They didn't ask questions. They didn't pry into what had happened. They just offered me the kind of support I needed without judgment. But there was one thing I knew I had to do. I had to face Emily. It was inevitable. As much as I had worked on healing, there was still that part of me that wanted closure. I needed to hear her side of things, even if it hurt. So, after weeks of avoiding it, I called her. I had no idea what to expect. Maybe she'd come back, maybe not. Maybe she'd apologize again. But this time, I didn't care about the words. I just needed to hear her speak, to understand why she had done what she did. She answered on the second ring, her voice hesitant. "John? I need to see you," I said, surprising even myself. "We need to talk." There was a long pause on the other end. I could almost feel her trying to process what I'd said, and I could hear the emotion in her voice when she finally responded. "Okay, I'll come over." The meeting was set for that evening. My heart raced with anticipation. I had no idea what would happen next, but I was ready. This time, I wasn't going to let her, or anyone, control the narrative. I had reclaimed my life. Now it was time to take the final step toward truly letting go. The hours before Emily arrived dragged on, each minute stretching painfully. I had no idea what to expect, but something told me I needed this. Closure, answers, even if they hurt. I couldn't keep avoiding it. When the doorbell rang that evening, my heart skipped. I opened it to find Emily standing there, her face pale and eyes red. She looked lost, a stranger almost, and yet I knew her better than anyone. "John," she whispered, her voice shaky. I didn't know how to come here. I didn't know what to say. I stepped aside to let her in, but kept a few feet of space between us. I wasn't sure I could handle being too close, not yet. We sat down in the living room. The silence felt heavy, oppressive. She opened her mouth a few times, but the words wouldn't come. Finally, I broke the silence. "Why, Emily? Why him? My father?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know," she murmured, looking down. "I felt so alone, even when I was with you. Your dad, he was always there. He listened when I needed someone. And I don't know. I hated myself for it, John. Every day. But it just happened. And I couldn't stop." I absorbed her words, feeling the weight of them crash over me. It wasn't an excuse, but it was the truth. She was lost, and I was a casualty of that. "I don't know what to say," I replied, my voice cracking with emotion. "You and him, you both destroyed everything. But the worst part is, I can't forgive you. I don't know how." She nodded, tears falling freely now. "I know. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I ruined everything." The words felt hollow, empty. I realized then that no apology could undo what had been done. It was too late for that. "I've spent weeks trying to understand this," I said, my voice firm. "But I can't. I can't keep living in the past. I have to move on." She wiped her eyes. "I understand. I'll always regret it. I'm sorry, John." We sat in silence for a moment. Then I stood up. "It's time to let go, Emily." She stood too, shoulders sagging. "I'm sorry for everything." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The past was over. I was ready to move forward. As she left, I felt a strange calm. The anger, the hurt, it was all fading. It was time to rebuild. The days that followed were strange. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't weighed down by the constant churn of emotions. The meeting with Emily, though painful, had given me a sense of closure. But it wasn't the kind of closure that healed everything instantly. It was the kind of closure that allowed me to start moving forward. I spent a lot of time reflecting on who I had been before everything fell apart. I had spent so much of my life building a future with someone else that I forgot to build one for myself. It was time to rediscover who I was, outside of a relationship, outside of the pain. I threw myself into work, but I didn't let it consume me like I used to. I began to set boundaries. I took weekends off, started taking long walks through the city, and even picked up some new hobbies. I found solace in the little things, a quiet morning coffee, a book that made me laugh, a walk through the park. It was the simplicity that felt healing, and for the first time in months, I began to feel like myself again. I also made time for friends. I'd been distant from them for too long. I reconnected with old buddies I hadn't seen in years, and it was refreshing. They didn't ask questions about the mess I had been in. They didn't need to know the details. They just wanted to spend time with me, to remind me that I was more than my pain. But even with all this progress, there were still moments when I'd catch myself drifting back into the past. A memory would surface, and for a moment, I'd feel the sting of betrayal all over again. But each time, I grew stronger. I let the memories fade faster. I couldn't afford to keep living in a world of what-ifs. Then, one day, as I was out for a run, something inside me clicked. It was as if the last weight I had been carrying, the last tie to the past, finally broke free. I realized that I didn't need to hold on to it anymore. I didn't need their approval, their explanations, or their apologies. The only person I needed was myself. I had a new sense of purpose now. I wasn't living for anyone else. I was living for me. As the weeks passed, I began to notice subtle changes in myself. I felt lighter, more present in my own life. For so long, I had been tangled up in the mess of others' mistakes, but now I was learning how to untangle myself. There were moments when I still found myself lost in thought, replaying everything that had happened, but each time, I reminded myself, that chapter is closed. I started to take better care of myself. I got back into shape, not out of revenge or a desire to show Emily or my father that I was doing better, but because I wanted to feel strong again. I joined a local gym, something I hadn't done in years. The rhythm of lifting weights, of pushing myself physically, was therapeutic in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't just about the physical strength. It was about rebuilding the mental toughness I had lost along the way. I also started focusing more on my career. I had spent so much time preoccupied with the personal chaos in my life that my work had slipped into the background. But now, I had a renewed sense of purpose. I threw myself into new projects, took on challenges I had previously shied away from, and found myself feeling more fulfilled than I had in a long time. Then one evening, I found myself sitting at a bar with a friend, having a drink, laughing, and feeling normal. It was a feeling I had forgotten. For the first time since everything came crashing down, I felt like I was truly starting to rebuild, not just the pieces of my life, but my sense of self. As I sat there, I realized that I had been so focused on what I had lost that I had forgotten to appreciate what I still had. My friends, my health, my career, the small victories I'd achieved every day without even realizing it. I wasn't alone anymore. I wasn't defined by betrayal. I was moving forward. And then, something unexpected happened. A woman at the bar caught my eye. She was laughing with her friends, clearly enjoying the evening, and when our eyes met, she smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just a small, friendly one, but it was enough to make me pause. For the first time in months, I felt a spark. Not for her, necessarily, but for the idea that maybe, just maybe, I could let someone in again. That the pain, the heartbreak, could eventually lead to something else, something new. I had spent so much time trying to make sense of my past, to piece together a life that had been shattered, that I had neglected to consider what came next. But now, with each passing day, I began to see the possibility of something new. The future was no longer a distant, blurry thing. It was within reach, and I was learning how to move toward it. Over the next few weeks, I found myself meeting new people, making new connections, and rediscovering passions I had buried for too long. I wasn't in a hurry. The idea of jumping into a new relationship was still a distant thought, but the idea of living, really living, had become a new obsession. I found joy in the small things. Weekend hikes through the mountains, solo trips to the local coffee shop, evenings spent with friends who made me laugh until my stomach hurt. It was the kind of life I had wanted for so long, the kind I had forgotten while I was drowning in someone else's mistakes. Now, I was learning how to enjoy it on my own terms. And then, one Saturday afternoon, I bumped into her again, the woman at the bar. Her name was Mia, and I recognized her from that night. She was with a group of friends, but this time, she wasn't laughing with them. She was sitting alone at a table near the window, scrolling through her phone. I don't know what it was, but something about the moment felt different. I walked over, trying to keep my nerves in check. "Hey," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "We met the other night. Thought I'd come over and say hello again." Mia looked up, her eyes lighting up when she recognized me. "Hey, yeah, I remember you. How's it going?" We exchanged small talk at first, the kind of easy, casual conversation that felt refreshing. But as we talked, I began to feel something shift inside me. It wasn't love at first sight, but it was something else, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, I was ready to let someone else in again. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. By the end of the night, I realized that I wasn't just talking to her. I was rediscovering the person I had forgotten. The man who wasn't defined by heartbreak or betrayal, but by the choices he made to keep moving forward. I didn't rush into anything. I didn't promise anything. But when Mia said goodbye, I realized something important. I was no longer looking back. As the days went by, I found myself starting to embrace a new version of my life, one that was different from the one I had spent years building. I wasn't the same person anymore, and I didn't want to be. The weight of the past was still there, but I had learned how to carry it without letting it consume me. Mia and I kept in touch after that first meeting, but I wasn't rushing things. We saw each other occasionally, spent time talking, getting to know each other, but it wasn't like before. It wasn't about filling a void or trying to find something to fix. It was just two people enjoying each other's company. And for once, I felt like I was showing up for myself, not for anyone else. I still had moments of doubt, moments where the past crept in, uninvited. There were nights when I'd find myself awake, replaying every word, every action, questioning everything. But they were just moments, fleeting moments, not the endless cycle I had lived in for so long. Therapy had taught me that healing wasn't linear, that it was okay to have setbacks, as long as I kept moving forward. And I did. Work had become a place where I could focus, really focus, on building something for myself. My career was thriving, and I was making connections with people who appreciated me for who I was, not for what I had been. My identity was mine now, and I wasn't hiding behind anyone else's mistakes anymore. I felt stronger, more grounded, more confident. Mia and I began to spend more time together, but I was careful not to rush into anything. I knew I wasn't ready for a relationship just yet. I had a lot of work to do on myself, and that was okay. But with her, I felt safe. I felt like I could be myself without pretending, without being afraid of the past catching up to me. One evening, while we were having dinner at a small restaurant, Mia turned to me with a thoughtful look in her eyes. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" she asked gently. I looked at her, surprised at how well she seemed to understand. "Yeah," I said, my voice quiet. "I have, but I'm not defined by it anymore. I'm choosing to move on." She smiled softly, her hand brushing mine across the table. "Good, because you deserve to." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Months passed, and with each day, I grew stronger, more settled in the life I was rebuilding. The pain of betrayal no longer haunted me, and I had learned how to forgive, not because the people who hurt me deserved it, but because I had to let go. I had to make space for something new, something better. Mia and I continued to see each other, but there was no pressure. We didn't rush things, and in a way, that made everything feel more real. We shared laughter, moments of quiet connection, and, most importantly, mutual respect. I had come to realize that relationships, the healthy ones, weren't about fixing each other. They were about growing together, supporting each other, and bringing out the best in one another. I spent a weekend away on a solo trip to the coast, something I hadn't done in years. I needed that time to reflect, to just be with myself without any distractions. On the drive back, as I watched the sunset from the car, it hit me. I was truly at peace. The weight of the past had been lifted, and for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to the future, not in fear, but with anticipation. When I got home, I unpacked my bag and placed it on the table. That's when I saw the letter. It was from my father. I hesitated before opening it, the old feelings of anger bubbling up. But then I remembered what I had worked so hard for, letting go. I opened the letter. "John, I know I've failed you in ways I can never make right. I've thought about you every day since we last spoke. I can't undo the hurt, but I hope that, one day, we can find a way to have a relationship again. I'm sorry. Always. Dad." I sat there, the letter in my hands, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just acceptance. I didn't need his apology to move forward. I had already done the hard work of forgiving him in my own way. I wasn't ready to reach out yet, but I knew I wasn't carrying the burden of his mistakes anymore. As I folded the letter and set it aside, I realized something important. I had already moved on. The past was just that, the past. And for the first time, I was living fully in the present, no longer shackled by what had been. Mia called me that evening, and as we talked about our day, I realized that I was no longer trying to escape or fill any void. I was living my life, embracing the freedom I had fought so hard for. The road ahead was wide open, and I was ready. Not because everything was perfect, but because I had learned that, even after the worst of pain, there was always room for new beginnings.